Well, you've been here at the University of Nebraska for how long now?
13 years.
And you no longer teach formal classes, but you talk and give talks, and you don't teach formal classes, do you? I should
No,
rephrase
I work
that.
with extension audiences, primarily adults, but I never pass up an opportunity to go to the classroom if there's a chance to
So you go
talk
where
about things that I think are important.
You're invited. Is the University of Nebraska doing anything about helping train students from other countries in appropriate agriculture technologies for their countries?
We have an active program, of course, as most of our land grants do, with foreign students, and some of this includes the opportunity for them to do a part of their thesis or dissertation work back in their home country under their real-world conditions. We're moving certainly in that direction, not just in research and extension, but in the teaching programs. We're setting up at the moment a Center for Sustainable Agricultural Systems that is not going to be a center in the sense of bricks and mortar, specifically assigned staff, clearly identified programs. Rather, it's going to be a philosophy that pervades our entire Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. It's going to be a philosophy that is a part of all of our curriculum, and certainly an influence on all of our research projects, and influence on our extension meetings and our approaches. So we're very excited about that. We will likely have at least one course and some seminars that are specific, interdisciplinary, across departments and all. But we think much more important than establishing one course or one office or one anything. It's much more important that we as an entire organization look at the long-term implications of technology, how we can set up an agriculture that will sustain itself with our minor intervention, using whatever power we can out of nature, using the natural processes, cycles that go on, and again, infuse this into our teaching program so that people begin to understand these cyclical, non-linear type processes that can help us to produce food in the long run.
That ties in, doesn't it, with the renaming of the department here at the University of Nebraska? The new name, which is the...
Well, we have now the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. We've had a renaming recently of Ag Engineering to Biological Systems Engineering.
Oh, really?
And then our institute, of course, is called the Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So I think it's a bringing together, a sharing of meaning, a sharing of views, certainly a realization that natural resources are not off here somewhere and agriculture somewhere else.
Yes.
These are all part of the same activity and
meshing of a concept.
Very much so. We have to work together. One of my range colleagues said one day, "Oh, we've been interested in sustainable agriculture for a long time. Our time frame is forever." And I thought that was apt. I think we are going to want to eat forever. Maybe not you and I individually, but we as a species would like to go on as long as is feasible, I suppose. And I think that time frame is a real meaningful one. So we need to think in a very long time frame.
What was it one of our speakers said this morning, that it was timely, sustainable agriculture was timely, and it was also timeless?
Timely and also timeless. That's right.
And you mentioned one of your range colleagues. I've never heard that phrase before. Are you speaking of someone who is into range management? Or
range management, sorry. A range colleague, okay. We have acronyms and jargon, don't we?
Well, everybody does, don't they?
Sure.
I wanted to ask you about your writing, because Jayne MacLean had mentioned that you have written considerably, and I know that you have. And most recently you have written something, or edited something called Sustainable Agriculture in Temperate Zones, which I had on my desk at the library before I came. And one of the things that intrigued me was your definition of sustainable agriculture, which began by saying it was a philosophy, and not a system, or not a way of integrating technology, but a philosophy, and went on from there. Would you talk a little bit about your feeling about it being a philosophy? Sure.
I'm delighted you have a copy of the book. I'm glad somebody bought one at least.
Well, I think we've got two.
You have two, yeah. Maybe we'll sell a few more. The question of definition is interesting. It came up during the conference here.
It keeps coming up.
It keeps coming up. Some people feel very comfortable with many definitions and a multiplicity of meaning. Others feel very uncomfortable about this. And whether that's a function of these people as individuals or their organizations. Some people, of course, different personality types, like to work with things that are very clearly defined.
Black, white, and all laid out.
That's right. It's intriguing. Somebody in UK recently cataloged, I think it was 600 some different definitions of sustainable agriculture.
I hadn't heard that.
So
That's
it's no wonder. It
amazing.
sounds like a project you folks might do.
Yes, we probably were.
You should get a hold of the bibliography at least.
Yes.
But it was intriguing, and I'm sure it's true because I've written at least 10 or 15 myself.
You contributed to this confusion.
Oh yes, I'm sure, and I love that confusion. I think it's
It doesn't bother
disturbing to
you.
some, but I think it's an evolving concept. As someone said in the conference, we're going to be defining this differently as time goes on. The definition that's operational 10 years from now, the kinds of constraints we're operating under, the resource situation 10 years from now will be far different than what it is today. Thus, I think we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner or build ourselves walls of brick between us or around us or in any dimension or any plane, because I think this is a far-reaching concept, and it's something we have to think about as a philosophy, something that we pursue, something that we optimize, if you like, and never perhaps reach, because we're obviously always intervening in natural systems and looking for ways to bend those systems to some of our own goals rather than to the absolute sustainability or survivability of that natural system. We are interveners because we have goals, and that's to eat and preserve ourselves and so on. But I think that we do need to think of it as a philosophy that can be then translated into practices, translated into operational activities, meaning farming systems, meaning integrated crop livestock activities. And as a number of people have mentioned, I think it's part of most definitions, these systems really need to be profitable in the short run.
Oh, yes.
As well as long term. If they're not profitable in the short run, it's certainly not sustainable for that farmer who's going out of business, though the next person that comes along might make it more sustainable. But looking at a much longer time frame than we normally do in economics, which is usually year to year or in small 5-year chunks or until the farm is paid off or whatever, we also need to include the environmental dimension. What are we doing? At what cost are we farming, losing soil, building soil, whatever? And what about resource dimensions? We have to have a resource dimension in this equation, I think, because agriculture competes for resources with many other sectors of the economy, and we, in fact, are very inefficient users of water, of energy, compared to other manufacturing industries. That's just the way agriculture is. We use anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 gallons of water to produce 1 bushel of corn, and that's a lot. That's rainfall and irrigation is about half of our costs in irrigated corn production here in Nebraska. So we don't use that water as effectively as people making widgets in factories where they're monitoring the water that comes in and so on. So we have to compete with people who are building widgets. We also need to compete for energy with those who like to drive a car, and many of us do. We have to compete with home heating, with fairly irrational cooling of our dwellings in the summertime. Irrational in my opinion, because we all survived for many years without all this cooling. But anyway, we compete, and that's the real world, and we have to be realistic and think that resources, in fact, are finite. We need to find ways to use those as efficiently as possible and look for ways to maximize the efficient use of renewable resources. That's all part of the definition. And I haven't talked about the social part yet.
No, well, keep talking, keep talking. I'm making notes.
I think we have to think of agriculture as being sustainable in a social sense, too. And several speakers at the conference talked about social sustainability or social viability. And a couple of things that come out in the definitions from time to time. One is maximizing the opportunity for entry-level farmers, people to get into the business without the huge investment that's necessary today. The other is to maximize the opportunity for economic participation in the operation, owner-operator, family farms, however you want to define those. I think that this builds stewardship. It builds long-term concern for the resource, for the investment in that land, to a much greater extent than a large corporate type structure where the majority of people participating in the industry become the equivalent of the hamburger turners at minimum wage in other industries. I think that does not bode well. Just as those folks who flip the hamburgers are not necessarily super concerned about the stewardship of that griddle and cleaning it up every night or whatever, likewise, those that just drive a tractor back and forth across the land for minimum wage are not going to be nearly as concerned about the long-term productivity, the viability of that farm, preventing erosion, and so on. than the person who has an investment in that land, who is tied to the land, who is very much concerned in almost a spiritual way as well as an economic way to that enterprise. So I think this dimension seems to come up in a lot of people's definitions.
The social dimension.
Social dimension.
It does indeed. It certainly has with people like Wes Jackson.